Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Module 3. This module, the first time I took it, was about 30 minutes long, so about the same as Module 2. I definitely have mixed these slides around numerous times, and so we'll see how it comes out this way, but I've really been juggling back and forth trying to make this flow the best way possible. Some feedback I got from somebody in the course was to break it down into parts, and so I've done 3 parts for this module to give it a little more clarity and wrap up per section, and maybe that'll help it flow a little better. So we'll see how that goes in comparison to how the other 2 modules were created. So let's get right into it. So part 1 is on deep work, and as you can see, deep work is a book by Cal Newport. This is a concept that he has created and pioneered, and deep work is, it's important to understand the context of his productivity equation. And basically, high quality work is produced by the amount of time we spend versus the intensity of our focus. And intensity and focus being dialed into a key part to really being motivated, having momentum, and moving things forward. And when we don't have that, then we're not getting as much progress or achieving the goals that we want at the pace that we would like. And so that's where deep work comes into play. And so what is deep work? So his definition is professional activities performed in a state of distraction-free concentration that push your cognitive capabilities to their limit. These efforts create new value, improve your skill, and are hard to replicate. And I've simplified this to distraction-free concentration plus pushing your mental capabilities results in new value, improving your skills, and is hard to replicate. And so deep work looks a bit like this, where you're really dialed in, where you're focused, where your concentration is really high, and there are no distractions around you. You're just focused in on what you have to do, and that's it. Now, if we contrast this towards shallow work, his definition is non-cognitively demanding logistical style tasks, often performed while distracted. These efforts tend to lead to not create much new value in the world and are easy to replicate. And the best way to understand that is through this image. And this image is a perfect example of basically how we do a lot of things in today's day and age, where we're constantly multitasking, doing many things at once. And really, when we're doing all these things at once, we're not really getting anything done is what it comes down to. So we've started 6 or 7 projects, but really in the end, none of them are getting accomplished. So deep work is being laser dialed in and focused on what you really have to achieve. It's work that you can only do, and it's not something else that somebody else can do. Shallow work is really non-cognitively demanding. You can do it while you're doing 2 or 3 other things. It's not very focused, and it's really anyone can do it. It's not something that's specific to you. So why is it important to know the difference between shallow work and deep work? Well, one of the most important things that came out of it is even the examples that he gave is Neal Stephenson as an example, an author who I was not familiar with prior to this, reading this book, but he talks about how he would not be able to write the novels he did if he didn't do deep work. And Neal Stephenson has won multiple awards. He's a well-known sci-fi author. Some of you might know him, some of you might not. But he's got a great quote that's in the book Deep Work. And he says, if I organize my life in such a way that I get lots of long, consecutive, uninterrupted time chunks, I can write novels. If I get interrupted a lot, what replaces it? Instead of a novel that will be around for a long time, there's a bunch of emails that I've sent out to individual persons. And this is him saying shallow work versus deep work. When he does deep work, he sits down to the task that is most important to him, that's critical to him. He writes, and that's how he's been able to write. I think he's written 20 novels over his career. I have his full bookography in the notes if you want to check that out. Versus if he does shallow work and a bunch of things at once, he focuses on things that aren't highly constructive and productive. He's not going to be writing. He'll be writing emails and he'll have nothing really to show for it. And so this is important to understand because there's this concept from deep work and it's about attention residue. And it really struck a chord with me. And this is why I bring up this entire book, because this concept is significant impacts on how we do things and the impact it has on our success with our productivity and how intensely we can focus versus multitasking and what happens when we multitask. So attention residue is a concept by Sophie Leroy from NYU University. She wrote a paper, Why is it so hard to do my work? And the easiest way for me to explain this is I got this beaker, and basically on think of it where you have two tasks, right? If you start a task and you do task one, but you don't get task one done, and then move on to task two, what happens is you have attention residue. And so when we start a task but we don't finish it and we move on to a second task, our mind is still cognitively thinking about how to execute that task, how to finish, how to wrap it up. So we're not fully committed to the task we're focused on, because part of our cognitive ability is still working on the last task. And so you can see when we multitask, when we do 2 or 3 things, really we're not giving ourselves undivided attention to the task in front of us. And that is impacting how dialed in we are, our concentration, our intensity of a focus. And that is problematic, because then we're not really fully committed to what we're doing. When I'm building this course, that's all I do. My phone is off, there's nothing else. Like, this is my deep work, it's my creative expression. I am dialed into this and there's nothing else happening. And so this image is a visual representation of how our attention splits. And I actually have this cool laser that I had no idea I knew about. But anyway, so if this is task A and it's unfinished, and then we move to task B, then you can see these bubbles. They represent part of where our attention is. This is where we are focusing on, and we're not fully at task B because we're still over here a little bit. And so that is splitting your attention, it's splitting your focus, it's splitting your intensity. So why is this important? And I just said it, it's the intensity of focus, because when we have our deep work sessions, the quality of our work is the amount of time we spend, so how long our work sessions are, versus the intensity. If we can be dialed into one thing, and you've all felt this, you've done this before, where you're so zoned into one thing and you feel like you got so much done, that's what we want to create as often as possible. When we do multiple things at once, that's when attention residue comes in. We're split up to multiple things and we're not fully dialed in, and we don't have that same intensity. So we all have 24 hours in a day. We all have 7 days a week. So how do we make that the most valuable time for ourselves? When we sit down to do work, it means we are doing what we need to get done and we're not dividing our attention. So based on the impact that attention residue has on us, our goal is to do undistracted work and complete tasks from start to finish. And that really helps us to be zoned in and dialed in. And here I use an example of a guy really focused in on his sculpture, where that's the one thing he's doing. And you might have headphones on. I think those are just soundproofing, but earmuffs basically, so you can't hear distractions. But that's the focus that you want. You want to be dialed into your task, and you want to be doing one thing, A to A, and getting it done. And this is deep work. And this is why I led off with this part, because basically this is how I do everything now. And Cal Newport's book on deep work has fundamentally shifted how I approach my work sessions. Now, Cal Newport is not the only person talking about this. Todd Herman, who is at Peak Athlete, who I would say is one of the best, if not the top guy in productivity, time management, goal accomplishment. Like this, I would say he's the #1 dog, based on who I've studied and come across. And he says most people, their focus is split between several tasks. And when they do projects, and turn my laser off, they do this. They work on project A, then they work on project B, and then they work a little bit on project C. Then they go back to project A, then they start project D, and then they go, no, they just start project E. And this is exactly how most people approach tasks and goals, and you wonder why nothing ever gets done, because we're not completing things from start to finish. And so what should we do? Well, we should start A, and we should finish A, B, finish B, C, and finish C. And that is one of the core principles. So Todd Herman has a program called the 90-day year. And one of the fundamental things that he stresses in it again and again is that we're going one project at a time. It's not having these multiple open projects at once. It's bringing tasks down and completing A to A, B to B, C to C. And that's how we're going to work more efficiently. And that's how we get stuff done. And that's reinforcing deep work, really being focused, dialed in, and getting that intensity to a high level so we have high productivity. So when we do this, this minimizes the amount of attention residue carried over from the last task, because we're completing task A, getting it done, then we're moving on to task B, and we're not thinking about the other task, what else we need to do, how we can finish it. We're just focused on one after the other. So that wraps up part 1 on deep work. Now we're going to move on to minimizing our impulsiveness. Because if we want to do deep work, undistracted work, there are so many things going on around us that we need to be aware of to really make sure that we're not getting distracted. And so how do we create these deep work time slots for ourselves? So there's a book called The Procrastination Equation, and Peter Steele's talk about minimizing your impulsiveness, and he has an equation for motivation. And one of the, and we're gonna get into the equation in next week's module or the week after, but what we need to know for today is that impulsiveness is one of the variables that has an impact on our motivation. And the more impulsive we are, and so what he says basically is impulsive is our need to be constantly stimulated, satisfied. And so we want to be happy, we want to be energized. And smartphones are the worst for this because it is so easy for us to get a hit of anything on Instagram, Facebook, and get some kind of engagement with something or a notification, and we want to go to that. But that is distracting us from the task at hand. So what our goal is to reduce impulsiveness and increase our productivity. So we're not responding to our phones. And so he talks about in the book where if you were to turn off your email notifications, that you would gain an extra 10% of productivity in with yourself. And if you aggregate this over the year, that would give you a month of productivity, of extra work time. Imagine that, turning off email notifications. Let me say that again. Turning off email notifications, a month extra. So you have 13 months while everybody else has 12 months. Now, what I would say for us is probably not email notifications distracting us because we're probably not working those. Most people in this course I know are not getting bombarded 9 to 5 emails and having that inflow. But what you do have is random notifications from Facebook, Instagram, and maybe some emails and different apps that are taking away your attention. And that's where if you turn that off during your sessions is really when you're able to make sure you're maximizing that time productivity. And we talked about this last week in module 2 where I created the acronym OFF for you, and the O stood for being off. And so this is just reinforcing, giving you more data and science behind why you need to be off when you're doing your work sessions. A, because attention residues come into play. You can see multitasking not efficient. And you can see like there's Peer Steele did studies on this, and 10% extra productivity to be able to achieve the goals that you have. So Cal Newport also talks about this in his book about how to, and I'll just move my thing down, reduce impulsiveness. And so he had a 4-step plan basically, and it's all around the internet. So you want to create blocks of time to use the internet and make these as frequent as you need them to be depending on your schedule and what's going on in your life. When you are not in a time block for the internet where you're allowed to use it, the rest of the time is free. And that time, and whether you're using that for work or something else, it's like you're just away from the internet. You're really trying to train and condition your mind to only access the internet or your smartphone during a set period of time. Now, if you need to get onto the internet for some reason, let's say you're in the middle of a work session and you have to, there's something critical you can get. What he says is you need to move the work session at least a minimum of 5 minutes away from the present moment, and you can't just jump onto the internet the way that you'd like to. Because the reason from a behavioral standpoint, when we blur these boundaries, then we don't have that same conditioning and training of learning to focus and not distract ourselves. So we have to keep those firm boundaries in place where we move it to 5 minutes out, and at that point we allow ourselves to get onto the internet because we're still conditioning ourselves how to not be distracted. And that's the key thing. We're really trying to minimize our distractions. And then 4, schedule internet time at home. And basically, because if you just do this during the day, during the work or during productivity sessions, what he says is that you're not really concentrating on and conditioning yourself to minimize distractions. If you only do it during half the day, then you're not really, at night you're being impulsive, it doesn't really help as much. So if you want to reduce your impulsiveness, a key thing to consider is minimizing your internet time. And he says the only time to really change this is, let's say you're going out for dinner and you're coordinating logistically for like in your text messaging, stuff like that, then you could be more reactive and impulsive to your phone. But he says to consider, if this is something that would have an impact on your life, to start blocking off specific set timeframes to use the internet throughout your day. And for you, I would definitely say when we're in our work sessions, what we're doing is we're being off completely. And we're gonna start introducing a small time segment at the end of it now to allow ourselves time to use internet based on Newport's recommendations. So that's what we're gonna be doing to really expand how we're using our time management blocks. So the goal is to train our mind to improve our ability to concentrate, because we really want to be dialed in and focused on our tasks at hand, and that we're don't have that need to be distracted. We're not going to our smartphone for a notification or that impulsiveness to be stimulated, energized, or get some kind of dopamine hit. It's really about us being focused on what we have in front of us, and that's the most important thing. And so Cal Newport says, don't take breaks from distraction, instead take breaks from focus. So when you're dialed in, you're focused, and you're keen and working, then yes, you can give yourself 10, 15 minutes to go check some stuff on Facebook, be procrastinating, do that. That is totally fine. Message somebody, but schedule that time, be diligent about it, and don't get distracted. So what we're seeing here is patterns. Oops, that's not what we wanted. So we're seeing patterns for uninterrupted work sessions, right? This is coming up again and again. Deep work, procrastination equation, Pure Steels is talking about, minimize your impulsiveness. And the one thing, a book we talked about last week. So, and that's why I came up with the acronym OPT for you guys, where you're off, you're prepared, and you've told people about when you're having your work sessions, so that way you can be dialed in, where your intensity is high, where you're focused, and you're really keen on moving forward with your projects. So there's 4 styles of deep work, and this is important for you to know because people think like, oh, I just got to sit down and get work done. And so there is, Newport developed 4 philosophies about how deep work actually works, and I found these very interesting, and I thought they would help give you some cadence about your style and what would work better for you and kind of getting your flow, because it's not just about everyone having the same fit, it's about people finding what works for them. So the first 2 styles are not as practical for the people in my course, and I'll go over them very quickly, but basically I want to include them so you kind of get an understanding of how they operate. So the first one is monastic, is what it comes down to. I have a hard time with this word. And monastic is basically like extreme radicalism of you go and work in isolation and that's all you do. And Mark Twain wrote The Adventures of Tom Sawyer like this, where he basically secluded himself on a shed, on a farm property, and just pounded out the book. And so this is radical seclusion, which for most of us, if we have kids and life and jobs, this is not really an option for us. Now, the second one is bimodal. And so bimodal is basically doing radical periods of isolation, 3 or 4 days, where you go intensely work for 3 or 4 days, or even a weekend, and then you come back to your regular life. So if you took off Saturday and Sunday, worked in a cabin somewhere, and then came back during the week. Again, possible, but not as practical for most of us. Now, the third one, though, here's where we're kind of getting into practical ones. So rhythmic. Jerry Seinfeld was known for being a rhythmic comedian. And his quote is this: the way to be a better comic is to create better jokes. And the way to create better jokes is to write every single day. And Jerry Seinfeld. So rhythmic is basically this thing where you develop a pattern of doing every single day. And it's called the chain method. And Jerry Seinfeld said the thing about the chain method is you put a calendar up on your wall and you put it up, and every day you write a joke, you'd mark an X. And the key is to get about 2 weeks under your belt where you've been working at your joke or whatever your craft is for 2 weeks, and then don't break that streak. Get that 2-week chain, get it under your belt, and keep moving through it, and then make it 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And when you do that, you start getting momentum and progress. And that way, every single day, you're committed to your craft, to what you're working on, and you're making progress. Even if it doesn't feel like it, you know you're putting in the work every day. And this is called rhythmic. And it obviously is self-explanatory in the sense where we do it every day, but you get a rhythm and a pattern. Now, the fourth one is journalistic. And the way journalistic works is it's deep work on demand. Basically, wherever you can find it, that's where you do it. And in the book, he talked about Walter Isaacson, basically the guy who wrote the Steve Jobs autobiography and other great novels. And this is how Isaacson works. And basically what he does is whenever he finds 30, 40 minutes in the day, he has a busy life, he just goes, sits down, pounds away at his typewriter computer, and writes. And the reason why it's called journalistic is because when people are writers, they typically have firm deadlines, especially if you work for a newspaper and you're a journalist. They're going to throw, the editor's going to be like, hey, it's 5 p.m. coming up tomorrow. You need to have this piece done. And so it's this idea of where we can create our deep work on demand. When the pressure's on, we sit down and we crush it out. We create that space and that vacuum for ourselves, and that's what we do. And this is the one that's going to be most practical for most of you, especially if you have kids. Is you're going to have to find slots in your day. Whenever you have that opportunity to sit down and do some deep work, then you want to get dialed in and connected to what you have to do. And one thing I want to point out is Parkinson's law at place here. With journalists, they would have a firm deadline, and you see how deep work is driving them to force it out of themselves. Since we have this mindset of like, oh, I don't have the motivation, I don't feel like doing it, This is why Parkinson's law is so important. It's like, for me in these modules, they have to come out every Sunday. So I get them done. Like, there's no excuse for me about like, oh, I don't feel like it today. I don't have the energy. I don't know if this module's good enough. Like, none of that shit. Like, I just have to get the work done, because if it doesn't come out, you guys don't have a course. And so it's that demand. And that's why Parkinson's law I put in week 1 in a very soft module where there wasn't a lot of ideas, because to me, those are some of the most important ideas in this course. And that's why I didn't want to bombard you in week 1. And I really wanted you to understand them. And you can see how we're connecting the dots even to back to week 1 consistently, and how these things are important. And it's all integrated. So for this reason, I break down my tasks, and basically this is a podcast. And the way a podcast works is I do the write-up. There's 7 parts here. Who is the guest? Why did I bring them on? One thing to take away, some things you'll learn. And if you look at my write-ups, those are the subheadings. And I've broken it down in these subheadings. And that way, even if I don't get the full write-up done, I complete a subheading, and then I know what I have to do when I sit down back again. In my ideal world, I get the entire write-up done in one sitting, and I create the amount of time to do that. And then I move on to this part. But sometimes that doesn't happen. But to keep my attention residue down as a minimum, what I do is I try to at least complete the task, and then I know what the next task is, and I know where I am in my sequence. So I really deconstruct things to minimal stuff that you can see here. And podcasts I do all the time, so this is just an easy flow for me to get into, and I know what I need to do next. Laser off. So part 3, bulking. And if you must do a task, it is best to stack as many associated tasks together as possible. And who said this? I did. And so I didn't find a great quote for bulking, but it's something that's had a profound impact on my life. And I'm gonna give you some ways that other people have used it. And so I created this quote because I think it just makes a lot of sense. So bulk tasking, Tim Ferriss, 4-Hour Workweek, really became famous for bulking your emails into 2 slots, 3 slots, or 4 slots in a day. He said the 9 to 5 were again conditioned to respond and react to incoming emails. And what's that forcing us to do is we're being responsive as opposed to working diligently on what we have to get done. So he proposed, and this is one of the famous ideas that came out of this book, was that you email at 10 a.m. and you email at 4 p.m. And basically what that allows you, if you come into office at 9 o'clock, it would give you an hour to work uninterrupted on your most important task, whatever you have to do. At 10 a.m. you get back to email so people can't say you're not emailing them. And then you go back to, hard work, do all your stuff. And then around 4 p.m., you check what emails came in and you get back to those. So we're bulking together emails into 2 set timeframes as opposed to just like doing it back and forth and all over the day. And that becomes inefficient. And he showed how diagrams in the book basically of how that distracted us and didn't allow us to get as much done. Now, another place you can bulk is a place that I've started doing. It's called the Power Hour. And what we do here is we're bulking miscellaneous tasks. I've had a few people ask me this. It's like, well, how do I clear off my to-do list? Like, where does that go? So miscellaneous tasks, there are things that are going to come into our life again and again. And so what Gretchen Rubin suggests is these power hours. And I have power hours Tuesdays and Thursdays, either at 4 or 5 p.m., depending how my days are set up. And I basically set aside an hour to get miscellaneous tasks done. And what Gretchen Rubin says about these tasks is that we get a very high dopamine release for completing these tasks. And that high dopamine release, it might not even be relevant because it might be something very small and obscure, like mailing a package or donating clothes to a thrift shop. But for some reason, we get this huge emotional and momentum rush from getting these tasks done. It's like a soothing, cleansing thing for our soul. And so these are important. They're critical. And you don't want them piling up because then you feel like you're falling behind in day-to-day stuff. So you create these power hours for yourself. You create them 1 or 2 a week where you can get miscellaneous tasks done. And that's how I get rid of a lot of my clunky to-do list that doesn't fall into a goal or something like that. One other thing I want to point out, people ask me about like groceries and working out. Those are regular things. So those wouldn't fall into a power hour. Things that reoccur again and again in your life, it is best to start finding slots in your calendar for them and make them a pattern, make them a habit. Because then we know how to prioritize that time and we get it done in those slots. When we don't schedule time, when we don't defend our time blocks, then something always comes in and eats away at it. And you can't even tell me what it was. Like you probably end up watching Netflix or something like that, or hanging out with a friend or reading some shit on BuzzFeed. And that's what happens. If we don't block off that time and defend that calendar, then nothing gets done. And so groceries, working out, that should be set things in your time, in your calendar, and you're defending that, and that's what you're doing at that time slot, unless something way more paramount comes up that really supersedes it. So again, we're seeing pattern here where we're bulking things together is what it comes down to. You know, we're deep work, this idea of setting aside undistracted time to really focus in and get our work done. We're bulking together internet time where we're responding back to emails and messages. And like, I would even go as far as like bulk together like 15, 30 minutes to check all your email, text messages, and Facebook and get back to it. That's what I've started doing, where it's like I have these slots where, okay, this is my 30 minutes to respond back to every single platform, and then I'm gonna ghost again from those platforms. And then miscellaneous tasks into a power hour. So we're bulking things together. And this way, and this goes back to the quote that I created, where when we have a bunch of tasks to do, if we can associate them together, it's much more efficient. And the way I wanna drive home this point is Henry, or the Model T, Henry Ford, when he invented the assembly line, prior to this, cars were being constructed one by one. And if he wanted to make cars for the masses, he had to create an assembly line. And what he did is basically put one person on and doing one specific task, and they were able to start doing bulk cars. And the same thing in our daily lives. If we want to become more efficient, it's not about responding to this text message, then doing this task, then going to the groceries, then writing back to this email, and then doing this task. Like, that's just not efficient. We have to bulk things together, and that requires planning, and that requires defending our calendar and scheduling things in. So you want to take the Model T approach where you're bulking as many things together as possible. So one last bonus hack that I want to throw in, this has really been a key thing for me, and again, about how I look at the world, and it's elimination. This comes from Tim Ferriss. He's big on this in the 4-Hour Workweek. And since this is probably one of the last times we're going to mention the book, I really want to throw this in there before we get away from it. So what is elimination? It's making more decisions. And decisions, if you look at the Latin root word of decisions, it means to cut off. And so we want to eliminate things from our lives that are not serving us. This goes back to friends, tasks, anything like that. You know, things that are eating up our time, even cluttering your life. Get rid of stuff. Start subtracting, eliminating things that isn't serving you in your life, because then you're going to have space for more things. So asking yourself, where can I eliminate? What can I get rid of to create more time for myself? Because you might have commitments in committees, on charities, on whatever you might have, where it's not really serving you. It's not serving you if you're getting to your goals, right? If you start connecting the dots, it's like, hey, if I'm volunteering for this charity organization 4 to 5 and my goal is to be on stage and be a public speaker, it's like, how is that really connecting me to what I want to do? So it's important that you really think about what you can eliminate. If you're really serious about your goals and you don't have time, what can you eliminate to create that time? Because we all have the exact same amount of time. It's really about the choices and decisions that you're making. And if you're not making the right decisions to subtract and eliminate things, then really you're just sabotaging yourself is what it comes down to. And there's no other way to put it. So here are some elimination questions from the 4-Hour Workweek. I've highlighted my 3 favorites. What are the top 3 activities that I use to fill my time to feel as though I've been productive? And it's funny, today I was to go to a conference in Toronto. I paid $30 for this conference, and I hadn't recorded this video, and I'm like, and I subtracted that. I was like, you know what, I'm not going because this is way more important to me, and yeah, I'm gonna feel productive if I go to this conference, like I've learned some things, but it's not getting me to my ultimate end goal. Like, I still have to get a podcast out. Like, those are things that are much more critical in my life, and I eliminated that conference, and that's what you have to do sometimes. Things that I really wanted to do, but you know what? That's just the nature of the beast. Second question, learn to ask, if this is the only thing I accomplished today, will I be satisfied with it? And the last question, put a post-it note on your computer screen and ask yourself, are you inventing things to do to avoid the important? And so these are some really good questions to think about. You know, how are you really procrastinating? How are you creating things that you think you have to get done but aren't really critical to your success and overall well-being, especially achieving your goals and setting on what you want to do? So you can go through these elimination questions. They're there for you. You can look through them, answer them, do an exercise on your own. So the actual exercises for this week, I want you to continue with the time audit. And I'm not giving you a lot of new exercises here because I really want to focus you on your time block sessions. Like, really, the biggest thing I want you to get out of this course is that you're time blocking, you're sitting down at those sessions at the frequency you set for yourself, and that you're following the format of what's really going to help you move forward. So I want you to continue with the self-time audit. So you're picking one day of the week, seeing how you're spending your time, And this is hopefully, this is a keystone habit where it's just helping you become more aware of how you're spending your time, and ideally will help you start moving forward in adjusting your calendar to how you want to actually be spending your time, looking at how you're spending it right now versus how you want to be spending it. The second thing, to the end of our time block session, so when you do your work session right now, you sit down, you do your work, I've asked you, the one thing you should do at the end of it is plan your next work session. So you should know the next 3 things that you're going to be doing for the next session. Now we're going to add in a 10-minute slot to respond back to Facebook messages, texts, and emails. So the end of your session now, if you're slotting an hour for it or 2 or 4, the last 15, 20 minutes, whatever time you need, is now going to be spent to planning the next session. So you know exactly what you have to do. You're keeping those dots connected. And then you're giving yourself time to get on the internet and answer any messages that might be of significance, or just even, if not personal, related, socially, you still get those done. And that way it's getting it off your head and you don't feel like you have those tasks to do. So we're just adding a small thing into our time block session. It's not really a new task or a new thing for you to do. It's just making your time block sessions a little bit more specific. And then I want you to continue working on your time block sessions off. So off, prepared, and free from interruptions of other people. And that's the thing. I really want to see you making progress on your goals. Last week I asked you, what one thing do you want me to hold you accountable for? Some of you got back to me, some of you didn't. The people on the calls did tell me. This is really like, I want to now start pushing you to start moving forward in your goals. We've deconstructed it. Now the next step for you is to start moving forward with that. And one thing I want to do is when the course is done, I want to keep track of you guys for the next 3 months. And just 2 weeks, I'll do calls every 2 weeks. And just really, and I'm willing to do these individually with all of you, and that is I really want to see you make progress, and find out how the course is impacting you, but really make sure you're making progress on your goals. So really get dialed into your sessions. Let's get some intensity, let's get some focus, and let's see you start working on your goals and using these things that I've created for you. Last, I have some optional exercises for you if you want to get into them. Elimination exercise, which I talked about. I've created 3 questions for you. These are a little bit different. Questions that I like: what tasks and project or commitments do you currently have that could be eliminated from your life to create more free time? What could I physically get rid of that I'm no longer using to create more space in my life? So these are optional. If you feel this would serve you, it speaks to you, do it. Create a 30-minute, 60-minute time slot, get it done. Power hour, if that makes sense to you, if you feel that's going to be beneficial, start slotting in a power hour into your week. And the last is bulking email, text message replies. Doing that basically throughout the day, giving yourself set internet hours where you can look at Cal Newport's rules, and if you feel it's going to serve you during the day or at some point during throughout your day and improve your life, then do that. Play around with it. These are different ideas. See what works for you, see what sticks, but definitely play these ideas of setting set time frames for using the internet and then going from there. And if you want to do it in your personal life as well, great. If you feel that's too cumbersome, then just do it during the day. But there's huge power in bulking your emails or your online response and even your social media time. Like Cal Newport said, don't take breaks from distraction. Like really take breaks from focus, and that's the key thing. So I'm going to leave you guys with that. Really wanting to see you focus on getting more intense on your work sessions and getting more done. And let's see you start getting some progress with your goals moving forward, because this is module 3. So we're basically 3 weeks away from the course being done. And I want to see the progress of how this is shaping up and impacting your life. So that is it for today from me. Thank you so much. I feel like I did rant a little bit there, so I might have gone over 30 minutes, but I hope it was powerful, impactful for you. And I look forward to connecting with you guys on Thursday. And I believe I'm going to have another video also recorded for you tomorrow. It's a score sheet. It's going to be short, 2-3 minutes, talking about how you can keep track of your exercises. And there's going to be a little bit of a value add in there as well about how to really, if you are creating a business, how you can understand what your customers are going to want and making sure that you're solving a problem that's really going to have more likelihood for you succeeding with your business or what you're trying to create, and you're not just building it for nobody and then you go out there and pitch it or sell it and nobody wants it. So I'll probably throw you that video for you later today, and then you guys can check that out as well. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to speaking with all of you on Thursday.